Well, following up one or two of those threads, the hidden injuries comes from a book by someone I interviewed, actually, a very good sociologist, Richard Sennett. And
Okay.
he wrote a book called The Hidden Injuries of Class,
Right.
which was a sort of Marxist, because behind it lies the idea of Marx and others that we aren't aware of commodity fetishization or how class works or anything. So we live in a world of delusion and false ideology. And the task of Marx and others was to reveal the real cost
Right.
of capitalism, which we bore without really examining it and therefore not doing anything about it. And so I think he took this idea to class and showed that every day we are actually crippled by the class system. And so taking that idea, I thought that there are all sorts of hidden injuries, which was the central theme of 19th century sociology, anomie and
Yeah.
rootlessness and loss of faith and so on and so on. And so some of the things I mentioned there, like death and grief and guilt and pain and the fragmentation of time and so on. Now, given that they're hidden, maybe one approach would be to actually start with something which many Americans, intelligent Americans, would agree, that there is something wrong, that there is a disease, that we are suffering from increasing inequality, from um, hyper effects of the internet and so on and so on. So we live in a world which is troubled and we're anxious about it and we want to understand it and do something about it. So we agree that there's something to be done.
Yeah.
Now, part of it is to explain how the Anglo sphere in particular, modernity, has built into it all
Yeah.
these, it causes these things. It's sort of Ivan Illich. It causes the diseases and then tries to provide some sort of a cure for them, but they're not very satisfactory. And once you've got people saying, yes, yes, that is how I feel, and I do agree, and we don't seem to have the answer, you then say, well, there are other answers in other parts of the world. They have their disadvantages too. They have their hidden injuries. But, and then you don't mention the word China, because there's probably still some sort of Beatles 60-ish residue of affection for India and mysticism and all that sort of stuff. So you say, in the East, they have a wisdom and a way of doing things. And if we could, rather like 19th century Easterners said, if we could only import some of the West, but not all of it, its technology and some of its efficiency and rationality, but not its destroy our spirit. So if you say the other way around, if we could learn some useful lessons from how other people solve these problems, and maybe that would begin to help us solve our problems. So you don't lay on China thick, but you then give them alternatives, and then they can choose. They're not forced to choose them, but they can accept them. All this depends, of course, on the assumption that we've talked about a lot, which is that it is possible to mix systems.
Yeah.
I mean, I've come to the conclusion that that is possible with China. They can continue with their central basic theoretical and ideological structures and family systems and import a good deal of the West. Now, I think what's going to be the big task of the rest of the 20th century is, can we do that the other way around? In other words, there are many things that we are facing from China, better models of this and alternatives of that, which we are going to import if we fight against them and struggle and try and kick them out and keep them out, as with on the technological level with Huawei and so on, it won't make our lives happier. It'll just make us more miserable. You can keep out Huawei or certain Chinese technologies, but in the end, they'll come in another form. And they would actually improve our lives if we used them sensibly and kept an eye on them. And it's the same with the whole Chinese philosophy of life. I mean, Sarah and I, from our own experience, find that this is possible in our own lives. I mean, I'm not Chinese and I'm not a Buddhist properly, but I've learned a great deal about how to live my life from my experience in Nepal and China and Japan. And if other people could share that experience. So we start with the diagnosis and the problems, and then widen it out and give some alternatives. That might be.
I think